Welcome and thank you for standing by. Currently, all participants are in listen-only mode. Today's webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be posted publicly. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. Now I'd like to turn the call over to your host for today, Wendy Peebles.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Lisa. I'm Wendy Peebles with the U.S. Census Bureau Economic Management Division, and the Census team is happy to host the webinar today, DEX Registration 101 and Upcoming Updates, presented by the State Department teams, the Registration and Compliance Analysis team, and the DEX Outreach team, which is responsible for managing outreach and developing strategic communications among their tasks. So we're happy that you have joined today. And before we begin, just like to share with you just a few housekeeping things, that at the end of the webinar, we will open it up for Q&A. We have the agency representatives on the call, so you may submit your questions by clicking on the three dots in the lower right-hand corner. Also, we have an evaluation. We value your feedback, and this helps us to build on our webinars and provide you with useful information from our federal agency that supports your business operations. So please complete the evaluation today. And also, the Census Bureau has an international trade helpline if you need assistance on regulations, where the Census Bureau team will be presenting next from our outreach area, as well as our data tools. So please call 800-549-0595 and a representative will assist you. So once again, enjoy the webinar today, and I will pass it over to Renee.
Thank you, Wendy, and thank you to the U.S. Census Bureau for hosting today's webinar. Hi, everyone. I'm Renee Caloris. I lead the IT Communications and Outreach team at DDTC. I want to thank you all for joining us for our DEX Registration 101. We have a great presentation planned for you today. Definitely will be useful for whether you're new to DEX or if you actively use DEX. There will be bits and pieces of new information that might be helpful for you. And so first off, I want to introduce our speakers. So today we have Travis Bryant and Douglas Parks, who support the Registration and Compliance Analysis team at DDTC. They are our go-to registration experts, so we're glad to have them here to answer your questions. And then we're also joined by Charlie Liebertrau, Ryan McMullen, Noah Batista, who are also on the IT Communications and Outreach team with myself. And just a reminder about DDTC's main mission, as many of you already know, our main mission is ensuring commercial exports of defense articles and defense services advance U.S. national security and foreign policy objectives. And so if we go to the next slide, we'll discuss the agenda. So we have a lot to cover today. First off, we're going to kick off with why should you register with DDTC? What does that entail? We'll outline new registrations, what it's like to renew a registration, as well as what happens if your registration lapses and registration amendments. And then at the end, we're going to cover some upcoming important updates. In DEX, we're going to be rolling out a registration renewal fees functionality, which is exciting. So we're definitely going to cover that at the end and then leave a lot of time for Q&A. So as Wendy mentioned, please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll be pulling those and saving them for the end. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Travis.
Thanks, Renee. Good afternoon and happy Thursday to everyone. Again, my name is Travis Bryant. I have been with Registration, Compliance, and Analysis since 2006. Yikes. But even with my longevity in this space, I am still, learning about defense trade controls on a daily basis. So we're hoping that, this presentation, will help you learn something new that you can go back and, share with your companies. Quick thing about registration is, you should look at it as your foundation, right? You're building a house, right? And you want to have a strong foundation because this is the first step you take to build your portfolio with defense trade controls. So, you want to make sure everything is accurate and complete so that when you're, building your license portfolio, your policy portfolio, it's that much easier. And so why register with the Department of State? Not because I said so, not because Doug, Ryan, or Charlie said so. The reason you have to register with the the Director of Defense Trade Controls is because it's the law. You can find more information on that in the Arms Export Control Act, established in 1976. So if you're in the business of manufacturing, exporting, temporarily importing, furnishing, or brokering defense articles, you have to register with the Department of State. And those articles can be found in the ITAR under the United States Munitions List. And with the registration, just because you're registered does not mean you can go export, to the UK, right? You have to submit your registration, and then you have to go to our licensing office, who will then help you get the licenses out to the correct parties. Next slide, please. All right, so when you register, there are 3 types of registrations that we're going to talk about. And within those 3 registration types, there are multiple combinations that you can have. So if you're strictly a manufacturer, exporter, or manufacturer exporter, you receive an M code. If you've been around for a while, you may have a hyphen with 4 letters in your code, or you'll have an M code followed by a series of 5 numbers. If you're a broker, you'll receive a K code with a hyphen and 4 numbers. One important tip about the broker registration, I haven't seen this so much lately, but I would say pre-DEX, a lot of companies would come in with the K code and try to apply for export licenses. And, we'd have to tell them, sorry, you can't do that. You have to come back in, start the process over again and submit a manufacturer exporter registration. So just a reminder, you cannot register for export licenses with the K code. And then earlier I mentioned that you can have different combinations, right? So you can strictly be a manufacturer, you can strictly, be an exporter, you could be both, or you can be all 3, manufacturer, exporter, and a broker. You can submit those registrations at the same time, thanks to DEX. And when you do so, you get your broker registration is technically free. You only have to pay for your manufacturer exporter registration. Another note about your registration code, right? We recommend not sharing it, with the outside. You can say, hey, I have a registration acknowledgement letter, but redact, some of the registration code. We can't force you to do it. We don't share your registration code with anyone. So, we recommend that you don't as well. We can't stop you from doing that, but that's just a recommendation for you. Next slide, please. All right. So registration timing, there's 4 numbers, 3 numbers that you're going to see throughout this presentation. 4, 12, 30, 90, and 60. The number 12 is how long your registration is good for, 12 months. So if you receive registration 9/30/2022, that registration is going to expire 9/30/2023. All right. Sometimes you'll receive, your registration will be issued on 9/15/2022. That doesn't matter. The date that you're going to want to look at is the last day of the month. So 12 months, 9/30/2022 to 9/30/2023. And like a Netflix subscription, right? We don't automatically renew your registration. So set a reminder to yourself that, I think my registration expires 9/30. Set a reminder to yourself in June saying I need to start working on my registration. All right. Review times. We are sitting at average of 30 days right now. That number has dropped from 45 thanks to DEX. So your average review time right now is 30 days. And then at 90 days, you can log into your DEX account and start drafting. Your 90 days prior to expiration, you can log into DEX and start drafting your registration. Okay. You can't submit. All right. You have to be patient. So if you log in and do it on day 90 and everything's great, right now you're still going to have to wait until the next number on the screen, which is 60 days. At 60 days, we allow you to, at 60 days prior to expiration, we allow you to submit your registration. So remember 12, 30, 90, 60. Those numbers are very important. Next slide, please. Okay, new registrations. Again, you're building your foundation here. This is just simply a screenshot that you're going to see when you're in DEX when it's time to create your new registration. Next slide, please. All right, so we've jumped to block 6 here, right? Blocks 1 through 5 are still extremely important, but for this presentation, we're going to highlight block 6 because it could be, you know, an issue for industry and for ourselves as well. Block 6 is where you're supposed to enter all, you know, your senior officers, board of members of the board, the individual that's signing the DS-2032 form. All of those individuals must be listed on that form. We say it causes a lot of issues because what happens is, you know, a registrant will only put, I don't know, senior vice president, okay, which is fine, but you know, we're thinking the senior vice president, you know, where's the CEO, where's the president, you know, where's their leadership? So what we'll do is we'll, you know, send you an email saying, hey, you know, and of course this will slow down the whole process, right? We'll say, hey, do you guys have any other senior officers within your company? And, you know, you either come back and say, no, at this time, you know, this person is our most senior officer, or we say, oh, yes, we do have a CEO, we do have a president, so on and so forth. So we're going to RWA it and ask you to come back with those individuals added to the DS-2032 form. So it's very important that you gather all of that information prior to submission or starting the whole process. Next block, please, or next slide. All right, and here's another screenshot of what you'll see when you're here. You're going to have to actually click the box to start putting in the information for those senior officers. Next slide, please. Okay, so, you know, to my veterans that are in the audience, you may remember a time where we used to ask for place of birth, city and state. We used to ask for your social security number. We used to ask for your home address, right? That is a thing of the past. Okay, we no longer ask for that type of information. We've simplified the process so your senior officers can feel safe with listing themselves on the DS-2032 form. You know, we just ask for basic name, date of birth, citizenship, country of birth, you know, phone number, email, position. It's very much simplified now. So you can tell your senior officers not to worry about having to share too much personal information. Next slide, please. All right, now I'm gonna give my voice a rest and pass it over to Ryan to talk to you about creating a corporate admin.
So you notice we're still in the same from here within the DS-2032. We skipped ahead a little bit to block 11. Block 11 is where you're able to designate a corporate administrator. These are not the same as a senior officer. They have an entirely different subset of roles and responsibilities. These are the individuals that are going to be responsible for the administration of users and users access within some of the DEX applications. They're able to manage security roles and access groups for users. So if you'd like to wall off or segment certain license applications or data, they're able to do so. And they're also able to designate roles such as drafter or empowered official. And they're also able to assign additional corporate administrators. We can go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So this is what Block 11 is going to look like on the form. It's going to ask you for first name, last name, the position or title of the person you're seeking to designate as a corporate administrator, some basic contact information like their telephone number and their email. And you're only able to denote one corporate administrator within the DS 2032. Now, with that said, you are by no means limited to only one corporate administrator. The form only supports one at this stage of the application, but you are welcome to add in many more. And in fact, we would encourage that to avoid a singular point of failure. If you have a time-sensitive registration renewal or licensing application, you don't want things to get held up because your corporate admin is somewhere on a beach in Jamaica. You want to have redundancy, you want to have backups and other folks that are able to provision and assign those roles so that your operations don't grind to a halt. So I've made the case for having multiple corporate admins. If you've been convinced by that and you say, okay, great, how do I do that? I have good news for you on the next slide. Now, this is where you're able to designate multiple corporate admins as well as the broader user management application. So once you've named a corporate administrator, they should see user management under their application menu, the same place you would go to access the registration app or licensing. And it's going to look something like this. You can see some of the different roles that your users have, application by application. And then on screen, you see highlighted a box that says CA above it. This is the designation for a corporate administrator. All you have to do is go in, and if you'd like to name an additional corporate administrator, simply check that box. You don't even need to hit a save button. It will automatically save your changes once they're made. And then you can also tinker with some of the additional roles if you'd like to name an empowered official or a drafter or what have you. Just something to denote, corporate administrators don't get some of these roles by default. However, you are able to self-edit. So if you become a corporate administrator, you are not inherently going to be an empowered official within the licensing application. You're always welcome to update your own roles if that's something that you would also be doing. So that's how you name a corporate administrator from the outset in Block 11. And then provided your registration has been fully approved, this is how you're able to name additional corporate administrators via the user management application. I'll go ahead and hand it back over to Travis.
Thanks, Ryan. And, you know, Ryan made a great point, right? Avoiding the single point of failure. So get people involved, right? We see too often where one person can just break the whole company's portfolio within the registration or within the Directorate of Defense Trade Controls, right? So, you know, get people excited about this. You know, get multiple people involved, and you know, stay on top of everything, and not let one person, you know, wreck your whole registration process or your portfolio with Defense Trade Controls. All right, so registration statuses. Some of them you'll like to see, some of them you will not. You'll notice that, well, before we go there, in the past, right, you probably have to call a response team to say, hey, my registration, you know, I submitted it 2 weeks ago. I have no idea what's going on. Can you give me a status, right? You'd have to call them up, and then they'd have to tell you what was going on. That's another thing those in the past. You don't have to worry about that anymore. Dex does a great job of letting you know exactly where your registration is in the process, okay? So you'll see there's several statuses that are in bold, all right? The ones that are in bold means that your company still needs to take action before it actually comes into Defense Trade Controls, all right? So draft means obviously you're still working on it, gathering information, awaiting applicant senior officer. And by the way, Defense Trade Controls defines a senior officer as a member of the organization having authority for policy and/or management, and must have signature authority to bind an organization. So that's what we consider a senior officer. And awaiting applicant senior officer means we're waiting for that individual to sign. In the early decks, a lot of companies would think that at that point it was with us waiting for our signature so we can issue it. So they would let it sit there for weeks and months thinking, everything was all good. But then we'd have to reach out to them and say, hey, you guys haven't finished your registration yet. So obviously that causes a lot of frustration. So just to be clear, that means it's waiting for your company's senior officer signature. Pending payment, that's a status that you'll like, because that means that your registration has gone through all the necessary levels of review, and we feel that everything is great. So now it's with you to make your payment. And with the payment process, there are several methods to make your payment. So you're not locked down to just one, method of payment. So that's great for you guys. And then the last status is RWA. That's the one no one wants to see. But it does happen quite frequently, unfortunately. That just means you have to come in, fix a few things, and send it back in. But again, log into DEX, set a reminder, log in every 2 to 3 days, log in every day if you can, just to see where your registration is. Next slide, please. All right, so this is another place that you're going to want to see. Again, I told you can make payments through multiple methods. I think it's Amazon, PayPal, ACH, credit card, and normal debit card, I believe. So you have plenty of options to make the payment, but you have 21 days to do so. If you do not make your payment within 21 days, your registration, unfortunately, will be RWA'd. And the history behind that is, we would issue a registration, and the company's registration would just sit in pending payment for months. So instead of, just allowing it to sit there, we get it out our queue, get it back to you guys to take the action that you need to take. Maybe you didn't need to register anymore, right? So, but we don't know that when it's just sitting in our queue. So that's why we decided to start sending the registrations back if payment has been made in 21 days. Next slide, please. All right, so this is probably going to be an area of frustration for folks, but these are the common mistakes that we see that will either cause a significant delay in your registration or cause your registration to be RWA. So we're just going to go through all of these really quick. Not including required documents of proof that applicant is authorized to do business. Okay, that's your articles of incorporation, your articles of organization, your certificate of good standing, your university charter if you're, a institution. We do not accept documents at the city level. These documents need to be at the state/government level. The certificate of good standing is great, but they do expire after a certain period of time. So we highly recommend, if you can find them, to just keep on adding your articles of incorporation or articles of organization. If you change your name, submit your amended articles of organization. But luckily, the system now allows you to add that information without having to RWA it. So an analyst may reach out to you, email, phone call, saying, hey, we need a different set of articles of incorporation. Please add it to your registration. And you can do so while it's still with the Department of State. Again, so we just talked about Block 6, not including all senior officers, partners, owners, and members of the board. That happens a lot. So, and with that, unfortunately, we have to RWA those instances where you don't provide all your senior officers. Get them all, collect all the information before you start the process and get them in there. Entering a company in Block 5 of the DS-2032 form that does not match the name on proof applicant is authorized to do business. All right, so that means Tim Smith LLC is the name that you put on Block 5, but the articles say Tim Smith Corporation, right? So, which one is it? So we need the Block 5 name and the articles to match. And again, depending on what the case is, it may have to be RWA, or you could find the correct documents and add them to the file while it's still with us. Attempting to register using a DBA, a fictitious name, those have dwindled down quite a bit. We don't see those as frequently as we used to, but please use your legal name. Attempting to renew a registration via amendment. This one has been picking up a lot because what we think is happening is companies are trying to renew their registration during in between the 90 and 60-day window, or before that, and that they're just clicking the amendment and thinking that that will suffice as a renewal. You cannot use the amendment feature to submit a renewal in DEX registration. Selecting RWA on registration dashboard after it's been submitted. What we think is that companies thought RWA was rapid, some kind of rapid action with your registration, because I do not think that we spell that out in the system yet. We're working on that. But if you select RWA in DEX on your dashboard, that gives the analyst the impression that you want that record sent back to you so you can fix something that you may have messed up. It is not a rapid method to get your registration issued. So if you select RWA, please make sure that you want the submission to come back to your dashboard so you can make some edits. Selecting USML, category 21, without having a CJ determination number. We see all types of numbers that are just made up in this field. So if you don't have that CJ determination number from our policy office, please do not select category 21. Please go through the other 20 categories and decide which ones work best for the type of work your company does. Not including a brokering report, not a huge issue that we see too often. But again, if you're a broker and you do select that you've had brokering activities, we do expect to see that report. So that will require us to reach out to you and ask you to upload that document into your record. And then lastly, trying to make a payment outside of DEX registration. You may not believe me, but we still receive checks. We still receive checks sometimes. Companies still use the old Fedwire payment method. Well, none of that works anymore. We need to make sure that payment is made within your DEX registration system. We showed you a screenshot earlier. That's exactly where you want to be when you're making your payment for your registration. Next slide, please. And over to Charlie to talk about the RWA process.
All right. Thank you, Travis. So Travis mentioned this a couple of times in his sections about this dreaded return without action status. So you've gone through gathering all this information. You've listened to Travis's piece of advice here. You've listened to Ryan on how to set up corporate administrators. You think you've got everything that you need. The form says it's fine. And you still get this response of return without action, meaning that something's missing. So the big thing here is you don't want to see it. It's not ideal. It does take some additional time in the process for the registration, but please know like Travis said, this isn't an uncommon occurrence. This is very regular. We have to make sure that the analysts and the officers who are reviewing these requests are getting the information they need to properly review what's in front of them. And usually what an RWA means is just that there's a piece or two of that information that's not there. It's not, the full picture is not available. And they just need to know exactly what's missing. So in order to fill that information in, we'll take you through in the system exactly how you do that. So there's a couple of ways initially to learn what's missing when the form comes back with this RWA status. So the first one you can see listed there in just listed out by steps in the points on the slide. So we're going to be clicking the hyperlinked case ID in our application history. We're going to navigate to what's called the feedback tab, and then we'll review the information that has been provided in that tab by the analyst or the officer. So we can actually see what that looks like in the system on the next slide. So the print's a little hard to see here if you aren't looking at it on a big screen, but I can assure you this is going to look like exactly what it will be in your application. So the first thing to point out, though, also, if anybody has any concerns about RWAing, again, you'll also look at the button on the far upper right side there that says resume. Within DEX, if you have an application that is returned without action, you can simply click that button to go back into the form and edit as if you had just saved a draft. All the information will still be there. Nothing is going to be removed. Nothing is going to be edited out. It is exactly as you submitted it, and you can continue picking up where you were, add the additional information that is being requested, and resubmit from there. So this is not a start all over from the beginning process. This is a just go back in and give us what we need request. But in order to get to that feedback tab, the link that we're talking about is actually in the upper left. It's a little small there. I think it says 6145 renew. And clicking on that opens up the view access to the case or to the submission itself. That's what's seen there in that middle screenshot. So basically just giving you the tabs at the top of details, the form itself. And then as you can see on the far right, if you click on that feedback tab, that will open the feedback chat channel. And it will show you any of the comments that were added by the DDTC officer or analyst at requesting the additional information. Now, in addition to that, you should also receive an email directly from the officer or the analyst, also detailing that information of what is required. So there are multiple ways that you will be alerted. So like Travis was saying, going back in, checking your status in DEX, making sure you're paying attention to that email box. That's an active one that you're using. You'll get the notification there. Multiple ways that you will hear what information is still missing, so we can make sure that we'll get that from you to process the registration successfully. Just a little side note, no limit to the number of times you can submit it. You can go back and forth and we can RWA it until we get it right. But obviously, in order to get things through expediently, make sure you're paying attention to what the officer or the analyst is asking for. Work as closely as you can with them before you submit again, and that'll make your process go faster. So should make your life a little bit easier. Now, and one other thing I should mention is that an RWA can happen with a new registration or with a renewal registration request. So we haven't talked too much about renewals yet, so why don't we dive into that? So on the next slide, I think, Doug, you want to take over?
Yep, thanks, Charlie. Happy to talk about renewals. Yep. So yeah, the great thing about renewals is they're very similar to new registrations. The difference being that all the information that you've put in from the new registration is there during renewal. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. But as Travis stated earlier, it's important to remember the two numbers here, 90 days and 60 days. 90 days out, we allow you to prepare the registration renewal. So this gives you a chance to make sure all the blocks are correct, make sure all the supporting documentation is there. You can also call DEX IT or get in touch with the DEX registration analyst if there are any issues. And then 60 days out, you're actually able to submit. So it's important to take advantage of these timelines. And another important thing as well is that this is an automated process, as Travis stated earlier. It's not like Netflix or an automated subscription renewal. You have to manually log in, take the initiative, and renew. If you don't do that, the registration will expire automatically. So it's upon you to go into the system and renew. If you don't want to renew, if you want to cancel, then you can just leave it alone and it'll expire on the expiration date in Dex. But again, it's a process where you have to go into Dex and manually renew. Next slide. So again, just hitting this point home, we want to make sure that you're able to submit as early as possible. So we want to constantly remind you of the 90-day preparation period and the 60-day submission availabilities. A great way to ensure that you don't miss those timelines is to ensure that you have multiple people who are read in on this process. We want to make sure that multiple people, just like with the corporate administrator recommendations earlier, you want to have designated more than one person who's responsible for looking at these timelines and milestones. It can help, cover the bases in case someone's sick, out of the office, on vacation, etc. So we recommend that also in conjunction with all these things, it's also important to whitelist state.gov as well. As Charlie was stating earlier, there are automated emails that have that state.gov tagline. There are emails from registration analysts, which will also have state.gov. So you want to make sure that you're receiving all those things. You shouldn't rely on them, but they'll certainly help supplement your company's policies and procedures regarding registration timelines. Next slide. So what happens in the unfortunate event that you do lapse? If you don't renew before the expiration period, it's considered a lapse registration. It's important to note that having the status of a lapse registration doesn't mean that your registration has been deleted. It's just expired. So during that time period where it's expired, you will accrue lapse fees, and your active licenses will be paused. And then once you come back into Dex and restart the process again, after that lapsed period, you'll have to fill out a date range for which the lapse relates. And then you also have to indicate whether or not a voluntary disclosure has been filed with DDTC per ITAR 127.12. Next slide. Okay, so we've discussed registration renewals. Those are submitted on an annual basis, but registration amendments are submitted ad hoc throughout the year. So there are three types, first being administrative, and then there's material change and MAD changes. The material change and MAD changes, those have regulatory timelines that are dictated by ITAR 122.4a. So both of those have 5-day timelines, 5 days within the occurrence of a material change or MAD change, you have to submit in Dex, but administrative changes are more free-form. So next slide. So with material change amendments, there are 7 different types. There's a name change, it's change to the registrant's legal name, an address change of the registrant's address, a legal organizational structure, say if the registrant changes from an Inc. to an LLC, eligibility, criminal charge, directors, senior officers, partners, and or owners. That's primarily in Block 6, which we discussed earlier. And then establishment, addition of subsidiary, controlled affiliate. So again, these material change types, you have to log into Dex within 5 days of the occurrence of any of those. So in 5 days of legal name change, address change, or any of these material changes, we would expect that you log into the Dex registration system and make the appropriate changes. Next slide. Okay, in addition, these are MAD changes. This is my primary portfolio. There are 3 different types of MAD change amendments. We allow you to select merger. If your company is legally merged with another company, you have a certificate of merger and one company survives and the other is dissolving. An acquisition, if the registrant is acquiring another registrant or a company that's not registered but is going to do ITAR in the immediate future. And then a divestiture, if the registrant is divesting a subsidiary or it's being bought by another registrant or just another non-ITAR company. So like material changes, these also have a 5-day requirement. So within 5 days of the occurrence of a merger, acquisition, or divestiture, we require that you log into Dex registration and make the changes. These changes are primarily made in Block 8 and 9 of DS 2032, Block 8 being for subsidiaries and affiliates, if you need to remove an affiliate or add an affiliate or a subsidiary. And then Block 9, parent block, if you need to add a new parent that's just acquired your company. So in addition to ITAR 122.4a, MAD changes also have an additional requirement. This is sort of outside the DEX system, but essentially if an ITAR registrant is bought by a foreign person, there's a 60-day pre-notification requirement. You're required to do this not within DEX, but the 60-day pre-notification is required to be submitted at the pm.dtccmad@state.gov inbox. We ask that when you make that submission that you supply your compliance program materials with that as well. That's 60-day pre-notification, and then once the foreign acquisition actually closes, then you submit a 5-day in ITAR for ITAR 122.4a, and you update, you go into DEX and then update it with that foreign party that you provided us with a pre-notification for in the 60 days. So that's how those two sort of go hand in hand. 60-day lets us know which party is going to be added. And then once closure happens, you actually log into DEX and then add that foreign party 5 days after closing. Next one. So some best practices. It's very important to know that you should only select the change type which applies to the amendment. For instance, a lot of times MAD changes and material changes, they'll get routed to different DEX registration analysts. So to avoid confusion, it's highly recommended that if it's a MAD change or if it's a non-MAD change, a name change or so forth, that you indicate that and make the right selections and block 2. That can go a long way towards streamlining your application and expediting it. And it's also, again, as we discussed before, it's a great way to avoid a return without action as well. And then the last point we want to make as well is that with regards to the amendment timeline, we do give that 90-day and 60-day period before your registration expires. If you have a material change or MAD change within that 60-day period before you expire, we actually recommend that you make that material change in your DEX registration renewal. So in the renewal, you can select renewal and you can select which blocks were affected by the material change. This avoids, there's a sort of something in our system where you can only submit one DEX action at a time. So you can't submit an amendment and a renewal. So if you've submitted an amendment, it may block your ability to submit a renewal in that 60-day period. So instead of having that conflict and having that amendment block your ability to renew, and say it's day 58, you've gotten an amendment in, but you need to submit a renewal, you can just simply submit a renewal during that 60-day period. The renewal should have, and you can make material changes in the renewal, and that'll go a long way towards avoiding any lapses in your registration and making sure that your renewal is able to be adjudicated in a timely manner, and that your amendment doesn't negatively affect that. So I believe that's it for me. Next slide. Yeah, I think we're sending it over to Brian. Over.
Yep. Thanks, Doug. So now we're going to go ahead and walk through some exciting functionality that's going to be coming to the registration application in the very near future. And this is going to be the registration renewal fee details. The operative word here is really transparency. There are a lot of inputs and a lot of very methodical calculations that feed into the renewal fee that you are charged by DDTC. This is making this readily available and accessible to you. So certain factors like your organization type or the number of licenses or the total value of the licenses that you've had approved will dictate the renewal fee that you're charged. And all that's going to be visible to you via the registration application. As far as the scope goes for the licenses that are going to be included within this calculation, this will exclude any license applications that were RWA'd or denied. It will include licenses that were either approved or approved with provisos within a given window. This information is going to be available to your organization's corporate administrators, senior officers, the drafter of your registration, and this will also be available to some of your counterparts on the other side in the RCA staff that we have. So they're able to see the exact same information that you're able to view. And then down at the bottom of this slide, we've linked you to the payment of registration page This is found on our public website under the banner item of Conduct Business. If you select Registration from the side, then select Payment of Registration, this will give you a breakdown of all the different fee structures. Please make sure to read through this and find out which fee structure and methodology is applicable to your organization. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. So this is what it's going to look like. When you are 90 days out or fewer from the renewal of your registration, you will see this button. You're not going to see it if you are more than 90 days out from your registration renewal. And that's because at that point in time, your renewal fee isn't quite yet set in stone. And I'll go into that with your license period dates in a little bit. But you should see this button right here within your registration dashboard in the application. And if you click on that renewal fee details button, you'll be prompted with this dialog box that contains a lot of different information and fields into how your fee was calculated. You'll notice the expiration date right up at the top. This is when your current registration expires. And then you'll see the license period start and end date. That means that any licenses that were approved or approved with provisos in this date range are what were taken into consideration when calculating your registration renewal fee. And if you notice, that's 90 days out from the expiration of your registration prior to the 1 year before that. So any licenses within that window are what are taken into account. You also have the total number of licenses that were approved within that window. In this sample case, we have 31. And then beyond that, you have the total license value of all of those 31 licenses. And if you notice the next field here, we have 3% of your total license value. This is typically used normally for organizations that have very numerous licenses, but a very low value. In some instances, they are subject to a discounted fee if this comes out to be less than the calculated fee. In this instance, the 3% value is about $18 billion. That is more than the calculated fee, so we're going to ignore that. And then this registrant is only charged $8,000 instead. You're welcome. So in this particular instance, every license over 10 is charged a fee of $250 plus the base fee of $2,750. So doing some quick math, that is a little over $5,000 for 21 licenses exceeding 10 plus the $2,750. That comes out to a renewal fee of $8,000 that's going to be charged by DDTC. So we've thrown out a lot of numbers on license value and the total number of licenses. You're also going to have a download licenses button at the bottom that'll generate a CSV where you can see all this information. We can go ahead to the next slide. And this is what that file is going to look like. So if you're curious as to which licenses specifically were taken into account for this calculation, here's where you're able to see that and export this information. So you have access to your license case number, the different license types, the date which they were approved, as well as the value of those licenses. This is where all that information is derived from. So you're welcome to download this file, access this information to have some greater understanding into why your registration renewal fee is what it is. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. So that's some exciting functionality that we have coming out in the very near future to the registration application. We also have some fun engagement opportunities coming up as well. We will be presenting at the Society for International Affairs Back to Basics Conference from July 24th through the 26th. If you're curious about staying plugged into additional outreach events, if you loved hanging out with us today at the Census webinar and you want to attend the next one, we always post that information and those registration details on the news and events page on our website, which is pmddtc.state.gov. And if you have any additional questions following today's section, you're always welcome to email the mailbox, which is pm_DDTC project team@state.gov. So those are some ways that you can stay plugged in and get in touch with us. And we can go to the next slide, please. And now I'll hand it off to Charlie for a brief survey and some question and answer.
All right. So, folks, if you have been watching the chat, hopefully you've seen we've got a couple of things, little tasks to do here before we dive into the questions. The first one is the survey to show, tell us how we did today. Please actually follow the link that is in the chat right now from Lisa. We definitely benefit from hearing from you how anything different or changes would help in these webinar presentations in the future. We want to make sure that these are as useful to you as users as they can be, and get you the information that helps you guys be successful in this application and getting all of this work done. So please let us know how to make these sessions any better if possible. This second thing I should mention, and that is the first question we always answer in our Q&A, is will these slides or will this presentation be available after the session? There's another link. Lisa's got that one posted in the chat as well to the Census Academy website. We're also going to have a link on our DDTC homepage. So follow those links to get to, hopefully in a couple of weeks, we will have this recording as well as the slides made available so you guys can access both. If you've missed a couple of the sections here and there, or if you have folks who weren't able to attend that you'd like to be able to share the information with, all of that information will be available. All right, with that, we can dive into the Q&A officially, but I will say you guys have been very involved and very invested in this conversation, which is great. Unfortunately, that also means we've got more questions than we're going to be able to answer in this session. So if we don't get to your question, which seems likely at this point, I will direct everybody to the DDTC homepage. So pmddtc.state.gov. On that page, there is a link for support. And within there, a link for contact DDTC. This is if you are not working in DEX. This is just to contact DDTC in general. We have two different sets of folks ready to help you out. Our help desk, it's there to help you with any technical questions. So if you're having issues logging into DEX, you're having trouble setting up a corporate administrator like Ryan was talking about earlier, any of the system issues, you're getting strange error messages, that's the folks to talk to. Ask our help desk. They will walk you through those solutions. If you have a lot of these questions that are coming in that are specific to your situation, so your company structure is changing, you want to make sure that you're doing that correctly, it's being acquired, you want to make sure you're putting the right information in the form to maybe successful, that's a question for our response team. And Doug and Travis work directly with our response team folks to get you those answers to those process and functionality questions to make sure, again, that you're successful within the system. So lots of other ways to reach out to us to make sure that you're getting the help you need, besides just hopefully this next few minutes of questions that we'll try to answer here. So again, if we don't get to it, don't worry. There is somebody out there who can answer your question. Just make sure you copy it down and send it to us through that. Okay, guys. So like I said, we've got a bunch of questions. So there's a couple questions in here. I think, Ryan, you and I should talk about this first one. There's a lot of questions about having a corporate administrator assigned who is outside the organization or not an employee. So is that acceptable? And then is that possible to also be, can a non-employee be like a license submitter or a registration submitter?
So this would be pulling from the organization's users. So when you see that table of some of the folks that they're administering access for, that's where it pulls from. So it would have to be part of the organization.
It has to be part of the organization. But I think that what I would recommend is it is possible to have a third-party user be part of the organization and could be a corporate administrator, therefore. They just have to be identified in the system, right? But we would recommend that at least one corporate administrator be an employee, that somebody within the organization has visibility into all that's going on in DEX. Even if they're not in it every day, they have the ability, right? And Ryan, can you talk a little bit about, though, because one of the questions specifically asks whether the corporate administrator or license submitter needs to be an employee. Can you talk a little bit about those differences again between CA, EO, and SO? Gotta get all my initials right.
So a corporate administrator and an empowered official, those that sign off on the attestation at the bottom of a license, and a senior officer are not necessarily the same person. They could be in some respects. There's nothing precluding somebody from wearing multiple hats, but they don't necessarily occupy the same role. So you could have somebody that is not involved as an empowered official in signing off on licenses whatsoever, but is still your corporate admin and administering user access and license access. And that also is twofold. So you could have somebody that's an empowered official and signs off on licenses regularly, but has nothing to do with user and access administration.
Right. So all separate roles. One for specifically registration, one for licensing, and one, like Ryan said, managing access with Index. So just something to keep in mind that can all be the same person. If you have a small organization, right, we can have one person be everything. But just want to make sure that folks know that those do fill separate functions. Okay, thanks, Ryan. Travis, there are a couple of questions in here going back to your one of the start in your section about what information is needed for those Block 6 folks listed in Block 6 for the senior members. So if, for example, will proof of nationality still be required?
Yes, we do ask citizenship. If you are a senior officer or the signing officer, and you say you have a UK citizenship, we're going to go back to you and say, hey, do you have a green card to support you being able to sign this DS 2032 form? So in certain instances, we will ask for proof of citizenship.
Okay. And then somebody else asked the question, and we have a bunch of board members, like 75 of them. Do they all have to be listed?
Well, we leave it to your discretion. We can't, how do we know, right? There's no way to know everyone you have within your company. If you feel that it makes sense, you feel that this person, will play a role or, holds, high authority within your company, sure. But we just don't know, everything you have. So we leave it to your discretion.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. And if there's obviously any questions, is that something they can reach out to the team to clarify as they're submitting?
Absolutely.
Okay. There you go. And I'll throw in as an answer to that one too, Travis. I know somebody else asked the question specifically, what is the definition of a senior officer? I know there's an FAQ out there on the website that people can go view, right?
Yes, sir.
But also matches up exactly with what you just said, to make sure that you are going to know specifically who are the people that have that responsibility within your organization. With that, unfortunately, we were hoping to get to a whole bunch more of these guys. I apologize. We had more information to share. Spent a little bit more time explaining it than we thought. But again, these are all excellent questions. We appreciate your engagement. Please send us those if they are still outstanding. And we will, our response team and help desk and by proxy, Doug and Travis and the rest of us will get back to you with those answers. And with that, I think we're good to go here, Wendy.
Okay, great. Thank you all for your participation. Special thanks to all the businesses who were on today. It really shows that you are invested in doing great work and learning more about the DEX registration 101 process and learn about any other upcoming updates. So thank you all for joining. And as Charlie mentioned, please complete the evaluation. If there's a particular topic that we have not presented in this series, we can certainly explore that. So please complete the evaluation. When you exit, you will go to a secure link for completing that. And once again, the presentations will be provided along with the transcript and recording within about 2 weeks or so. So check back to the website, and we hope you enjoyed it, and we hope to see you on future webinars. Thank you and enjoy your day.